CNN has spent the entire week ringing the alarm bells for Kamala Harris. In fact, just earlier today, Harry Enten said that Kamala looks more like a loser than a winner. But before I show you that video, I want to go back earlier in the week and show you the moment when CNN's Anderson Cooper and John King were shocked by Trump's historic polling numbers in this key battleground state.
How is Vice President Harris performing with young voters compared to how President Biden did in 2020?
Some numbers, Anderson, to help with that question. Number one, just look at this choice for president. I want to stretch this out a little bit. Excuse me for turning my back. This is a recent New York Times Siena poll. It shows Donald Trump and the vice president tied among voters aged 18 to 29. Joe Biden carried that group by 24 points in 2020 in the exit polls. From being on the ground, remember, when you poll a smaller subgroup in a poll, there's a bigger margin of error. I can't quite believe it's a tie from being on the ground several times in Michigan, but there's no question the vice president is doing better than President Biden was doing earlier this year, when a lot of young voters didn't want him to be the candidate anymore. But she's not doing as well as he did back in 2020. There's no doubt about that. Absolutely no doubt about it.
Those are just stunning numbers for Trump. In fact, they're historic because Democrats have historically won the youth vote in the last few elections. On top of that, Democrats usually win the minority vote. They usually win the union vote. And yet, all of these groups seem to be breaking in Trump's favor, or he's made historic gains with these groups. Now, this was in the key swing state of Michigan. They're showing a tie among younger voters. So what do the polls say? According to Real Clear Politics, Trump has won 3 of the last 4 polls taken in Michigan. Now, you'll notice Kamala Harris still has the lead of 0.7 percentage points, but that's only because of polls taken earlier in the month of September. Now, since Trump has won 3 of the last 4 polls, that clearly shows a trend line, a movement in Trump's favor, and that's exactly where he wants to be leading up to Election Day, right? Because he wants to seal the deal. Now, the key here to look at is, the reliability of these polls. I've already done videos talking about Atlas Intel, which was the most accurate in 2020 in the New York Times. But one poll here that I haven't talked much about is Trafalgar, and they were one of the most accurate in 2020 as well as 2016. And you'll notice that they have Trump up 2 points. So let's say Trafalgar has the same accuracy they did in the last 2 elections. If the election were held today, this is what the electoral map would look like. Vance would win 296 electoral votes compared to Democrats' 226. Now, you'll notice Trafalgar left Georgia blank, and that's because Trafalgar currently has a tie there. But this is great news for Trump. Now, one of my favorite polls, for those of you who are longtime watchers of the channel, you know my favorite poll is the Atlas Intel poll because, obviously they show Trump up 4 points in Michigan, but on top of that, they were the most accurate pollster in 2020. So assuming they're the most accurate today, this is great news for Trump in Michigan. But Atlas Intel actually diverges from Trafalgar. So again, this is Trafalgar's map. You'll notice, again, they left Georgia blank, but Atlas Intel actually called Georgia for Trump, and Atlas Intel flipped North Carolina. They had North Carolina blue for Kamala Harris. They have her up 2 percentage points there. So it's interesting to me that Trafalgar and Atlas Intel disagree on 2 states. They disagree on Georgia and North Carolina, but they agree on Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And as I've said many, many times, it's nearly impossible. There is a 97% chance Trump wins the election if he wins Pennsylvania. I mean, that is how critical the state of Pennsylvania is. So to me, this is great news. Again, the Trafalgar map, which matches Atlas Intel in the Rust Belt, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, great news for Trump. They disagree on North Carolina, Georgia. And like I've said before, it will be nearly impossible for Kamala Harris to win the election if she loses Pennsylvania. In fact, if Trump wins Pennsylvania, he has a 97% probability of winning the entire election. It is that pivotal of a battleground state. Now, it'll be interesting to see the fallout of Hurricane Helene, if any, in Georgia and North Carolina. Fortunately, in Florida, like I mentioned in yesterday's video, Ron DeSantis has announced that he's making it safe, convenient, and easy for victims of Hurricane Helene to vote, and I hope that Georgia and North Carolina follow suit. Now, one of the ways you can tell how a campaign is doing is by following where the candidates go, right? Because if a candidate goes to a certain state, you can tell that they're either on offense or defense. So what's interesting is that on top of all this new polling, Kamala Harris went yesterday to Wisconsin. The media focused on the fact that she brought Liz Cheney with her, but they left out this one key detail. According to Axios, the Democrat Senate candidate in Wisconsin decided not to campaign with Kamala Harris. It was just Liz Cheney. So why did the Democrat Senate candidate not appear with Kamala Harris? Usually you want to appear with the top of the ticket. There's usually coattail effects, right? Whenever Trump goes somewhere, Senate candidates, House candidates, heck, even governors want to be seen with him because they want that down ballot effect from the top of the ticket. So if the Democrat Senate candidate in Wisconsin doesn't want to be seen with Kamala, that really, I think, sheds light on the true state of the race in Wisconsin. And on top of that, Axios is confirming at the very bottom here, Baldwin leads by just 2 points in internal Democrat polling. And as I've said, the internal polling is the most accurate because the consultants have every reason to want their internal numbers to be accurate because they want to win. Whereas public-facing polls are often used to shape public opinion instead of reflect public opinion. So Axios just said, their internal polling has the Democrat Senate candidate 2 points ahead. Let's compare that to the public polling. The public polls show that she's ahead by 3.5 points. So in other words, if this is to be believed, the public polls are overestimating the Democrat support by a minimum of 1.5 percentage points. But if you take a look at some of these specific polls, some of them have her up by as much as 7 points. So, it'll be really interesting to see what that actually looks like. Now, yesterday, the Democrats trotted out Liz Cheney in Wisconsin, and what's really interesting to me is the Democrats say that Republicans are the weird ones. Republicans are the bullies. Donald Trump is the one focused on personal attacks instead of policy. Yet they trotted out Liz Cheney and cheered when she said this.
House leadership. So, in other words, I was a Republican even before Donald Trump started spray tanning.
I mean, I'm sorry. You've got to be not only just out of touch, but truly desperate to think that Liz Cheney is relevant for any Republican or any independent, to trot her out there like she's some show pony and think that that's going to help you on the campaign trail. I think that really speaks to the desperation coming from Kamala Harris's camp. And look, it's not just the polling numbers when it comes to young voters, right? The earlier CNN clip. It's minorities, union voters. So CNN's Harry Enton took a different approach this morning. Instead of just looking at the polls, he looked at right track, wrong track, and then he compared it to historical election results. And what he found is that Kamala looks more like a loser than a winner. His words, not mine.
I think that this sort of gets at a problem for Kamala Harris's campaign. Just 28% of Americans think the U.S. is on the right track. And I want you to put that into perspective, right? When does the average, when the incumbent party loses the election, look at that. It's just 25%. That looks a heck of a lot like that 28%, right, that currently think the country is on the right track. When the White House party wins, i.e. Kamala Harris's party, the Democrats, 42% on average think that the country is on the right track. This 25% looks a lot more like this 28%. It doesn't look anything like this 42%. This, to me, is a bad sign for Kamala Harris's campaign. The bottom line is, it looks a lot more like a loser than it does like a winner when it comes to the country being on the right track.
And there's just a lot of reason for people to feel uncertain about the future. I mean, on top of the economic news, we have a wide open border. You see the world up in flames. We see what's happening in the Middle East, Europe, Asia. I mean, it's scary times. So no wonder most people think the country is on the wrong track. And on top of that, so the Democrats are trying to spin the jobs reports number. According to the New York Times, U.S. hiring surged and it surpassed expectations, right? So 254,000 jobs were added in September, which sounds great, but you'll notice that's actually a downward trend line. And you'll notice that jobs were really high being added in 2021, but of course those were bounce back jobs from COVID, from the shutdowns, right? And on top of that, you see the number of jobs being added just dropping. And unfortunately for Democrats, while that is happening, the unemployment rate has actually gotten higher. So you'll notice, and by the way, these numbers are from the National Bureau of Economic Research. I took this from the government's official website. And you'll notice that unemployment now is higher than it was when Trump was in office. So you'll notice that unemployment went down dramatically while Trump was in office. Of course, it spiked because of COVID, but so that was an artificial spike, really, if we think about it. But now we see unemployment going back up. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, Daniel, how can we be adding more jobs and yet unemployment goes up? The answer for that actually is really simple. It's that people are working multiple jobs. There are many people with 2 jobs, 3 jobs, 4 jobs in order to make ends meet. And so whenever a job is added, that includes a lot of those people. And so that's why the unemployment rate is able to go up while jobs are also being added. And that again underscores, the hardships people are facing in today's economy, the higher cost of living, inflation. I mean, it's just not good news for Democrats. Now, Harry Enten also went on to say that there's no historical precedent for someone winning the election, for an incumbent party winning the election with numbers this bad. Here's what he said.
And an incumbent party win with numbers like this.
Yeah, so if we look historically speaking, right, and we say, okay, say the U.S. is on the right track, the incumbent party, when they win. Today, again, it's just 28%. Look throughout history, right? 96, 88, 04, 12, 84. In all these instances, far more than 28% thought that the country was on the right track. 39 was the lowest back in 1996. We got upwards of 47% in 84. Of course, that was a blowout, right, for Ronald Reagan. So there is no historical precedent for the White House party winning another term in the White House when just 28% of the country thinks that we're on the right track. John, simply put, it would be historically unprecedented.
Right. And so we're going back again. So there are just so many signs. And that's why I said CNN is ringing the alarm bells for Kamala Harris, because not only do you have the polls, the latest Michigan polls, like we talked about earlier in the video, Trump has won 3 of the last 4 of them. If Trafalgar is right, like they were in 2020, he just wins the election outright. When you take a look at the other polls, even the New York Times, those polls have historically underestimated Trump. And even if Trump, even if the polls are closer than they were in 2016 and 2020, I mean, if they underestimate him even by just half that number, Trump still wins. And then you combine it with that data that CNN's Harry Enten is talking about. It's no wonder that the Harris campaign appears to be panicking. It's no wonder that CNN is ringing the alarm bells. It's no wonder that Kamala Harris trotted out Liz Cheney to Wisconsin. Either she's playing defense or offense in Wisconsin. I don't know which one. But the fact that she's there tells you that Wisconsin is in play, or else she wouldn't have gone there. We only have so many days. They have finite resources. She can only be one place at a time. So something is happening in Wisconsin is all that I'm saying. Now, rules are made to be broken, but not necessarily. And so here is Harry Enten answering the question of, could this year be an exception to the rule or not?
This much. Kamala Harris better hope that's the case, because otherwise this right track, wrong direction situation will not work out in their favor.
The other thing Democrats do say is numbers like the jobs numbers we just saw, they are seeing things improve a little bit week by week on the margins.
Yeah, I would say, look, right now, if we're saying, 28% of the country is on the right track, that number was closer to low 20s at the beginning of the year. So it has gone up a little bit, but still, you're very much in the danger zone when we're looking at that right track, wrong direction number. That's where Democrats are right now. They're going to have to hope that there's a historical norm broken like there was in the past midterm, because if there isn't, Donald Trump's going to end up in the White House.
I will tell you, no one except for Tom Cruise in Top Gun likes being in the danger zone. Harry Enten, thank you very much for that. Goose did. Kate?
I don't even know what to do. I'm going to leave it because that was really
always best with John to just leave it.
I know, but it was a bit of a mic drop. It was a good one. Good one. I don't like to give him compliments.
One final story I want to get to today that I thought was interesting. So the vice presidential debate was earlier this week. I think we all agree that J.D. Vance won. Even the media agrees that J.D. Vance won. Well, according to Politico, Politico, it sounds like Kamala Harris is avoiding Tim Walz on the campaign trail. Walz is kicking off a bus tour through central Pennsylvania on Wednesday with local labor leaders, blah, 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 blah. And then the campaign swing through critical battleground state was originally scheduled to include Harris, who is now heading to Georgia to tour hurricane damage. Senator John Fetterman is joining Walz instead. So, a lot of people are reading into that. Is Kamala Harris really going down to tour hurricane victims and see the devastation? Does she really care? Was that just a photo op? Or, is she trying to avoid Tim Walz? And of course, it doesn't have to be either or. Maybe she's trying to avoid Walz and she used the hurricane as an excuse. But as always, all of that is my analysis, my commentary. That's what's going on from my point of view, and I want to hear about what you think. What do you think about these polling numbers from CNN? Look, I know a lot of people don't put a lot of stock in the polls. The only poll that matters, of course, is on election day. But I do think there's value here. The campaigns certainly see value. It tells them where they should put their resources, where they should put their effort and their energy. So until we actually get election results, I think it is fascinating to look at this, and I'd love to hear what you guys think of this breakdown of numbers. If you haven't already, please be sure to give me a thumbs up. I know it's a simple thing to ask, but it really does help me in the algorithm to reach more viewers like you. Be sure to smash that subscribe button and to check out one of these videos.